On Living Ramadan, entertainer and inspirational speaker Deen Jazz tells us about his spiritual journey and musical path in life. As a result of the spiritual dynamics of this holy month, Ramadan touches the hearts and minds of more than just the Muslim community. Akbar Khalfe tells us about the history of the hospital welfare and Muslim educational movement. His colleague Muhammad Umar focuses on the development of Madrasatul Khair. South Africans living abroad compare their Ramadan. Tonight, inspirational and motivational speaker Abdul Ghani Babu Fablanka shares his insights on how one should live their life. We end off with a spiritual melody.
So subsequent to matriculating in 1995, and gosh, it feels like summer of 69, I then, with my parents' guidance, made the decision to pursue academic studies in the field of marketing, communications and management, business management, and through the IMM Graduate School of Marketing, which was a really, really good experience, you know. And so there I nourished my business skills, communication skills. I've always had an extreme passion for the English language. My family actually used to literally giggle at me because I used to sit at the TV with a dictionary and watch all these soapies and series, and every time I heard a big word, I would like, hey, afterwards, you know, next day I'm practicing that word with everybody, and I used to get quite annoyed actually. And so I pursued the academic studies, graduated in 1999, started to do honors, but it just became a bit much, managing work and studies, and so I said, I'm just going to stop, focus on creating employment for myself. But I've always actually been involved in multiple things at the same time. So even when I was at school, I was working at Clicks on the weekend and casualing at Total Sports in the evening, you know, or in a call center managing a team on a weekend at Home Choice while casualing in the evening at Total Sports. And because I only got a part bursary for my academic studies, and so I had to fund the rest myself, you know. So I've always been involved in a lot of things at the same time, and you know, as the saying goes, everything has gold and shadow, you know, so managing that dynamic, the blessings and there's burdens involved, you know, but alhamdulillah, I managed to push through. So after that, I focused on stable employment, but my heart always gravitated back towards the arts, man, you know. And so a friend of mine came to my house, I'll never forget, his name was Andre Solomons, we've been friends for years, and he had this Athlone News paper clip, and it was about this local music school in the community called Prompt Music School. I think it was it was an NGO funded by Standard Bank or something, and basically they housed, just picture this, a class of students ranging from the age of like 16 to 35, 36 in the same class, from different backgrounds, from Mitchell's Plain to Macassar or Constantia, Bergfleet, Bishop's Court, Manenberg, in the same class. And so I released my first single called Feel for Life 5 years ago, which is also the name of my coaching practice, life coaching practice. And yeah, that has been my most popular song and progressive song. And they're playing it again now because of Youth Day and stuff like that. And the line basically says, I feel for life, get to know the people of the world. You know, it's a very uplifting song, telling us to come together, you know, to focus on the pluses, you know, of life and gratitude. And yeah, that song topped the charts. It was like 3 weeks at number 1, 2 weeks at number 2, 13 weeks on the charts, got airplay in Thailand and the UK. So alhamdulillah, I was really grateful for that chapter. And then I just continued to become hungry to connect with more creatives, you know. And I Googled songwriting, and Clive Ridgway's name popped up in the Cape Town School of Songwriting. Next thing you know, I'm doing a songwriting course, and I'm writing songs or co-writing songs or having songs written for me by the likes of Clive Ridgway. And I mean, he's written for Jonathan Butler, Judith Sapuma, Blackbird, to mention a few. So I was really grateful, alhamdulillah, for that opportunity as well. And so that gave, sort of laid the foundation for me to want to pursue an album as well, which I will be releasing 13 years in the making in the summer of 2016, inshallah. And so, like I said initially, there's gold and shadow with everything. So every lifestyle has a dynamic with challenges, you know. So that was certainly navigating around that and trying to create stability, because that's what it's about, you know. So the way I go about sort of navigating myself through this month is just to become more conscious of what I'm doing, to make niyat in the morning, you know, as to what intention I have for the day, for the week, and for this month, and And generally for me, at the beginning of Ramadan, it's really an intentional niyat of wanting to be more mindful of how I'm showing up, you know. So trying to be more, do things consciously, even something as trivial as breathing, which is actually not that trivial, but just breathing consciously. Seeing somebody at the robot, you know, consciously taking the time to maybe connect with that person and offer them something that you know you are blessed to have and they don't have, you know. When I had some health challenges, I was diagnosed with colon cancer in September of 2012, 26th, the day I'll never forget. And that completely just shifted me into another direction, just in terms of realizing how precious life is, you know. And 8 rounds of chemo, 3 major surgeries later, ileostomy bag attached to my tummy for 8 months. In fact, there was one of the nurses at Kingsbury Hospital who was doing a master's, and she did a thesis on Muslims, young Muslim men and women that have to live with an ileostomy bag permanently, you know. And alhamdulillah, I only had to have it for 8 months while I was on chemo. So that was a very challenging time of my life, you know. And prayer and dua, great support systems for my family and my music is what really got me through that journey, you know. And so now this is my 4th year subsequent to that chapter, you know. And Ramadan, I've grown up in a very liberal family where we absolutely love Islam, and we also absolutely love and respect other religions, you know, because my dad was born Christian, and so I've got a Christian family, you know. And for me, Ramadan is really about just becoming even more conscious about how you're showing up in the world, you know. I think it's something, it sounds idealistic, but it's something that I think most people strive for, even outside of the context of Ramadan. But certainly you're much more acutely aware, or I am, I'll own that statement, I am much more acutely aware of, you know the saying, from him we come and to him we will return. And so this month is really, for me, becoming more conscious about how I'm showing up, you know, in the world, building the capacity to be more compassionate, more empathetic, you know, realizing that we all have a basic human need to give, and we also have the same capacity to receive, you know, and just going out there and asking yourself, or asking myself through every interaction that I have with people is, how can I add value, you know? And so we are living in a time, particularly in this African context, where there's very much of a poverty-conscious energy floating around, you know. And so I try very hard to not subscribe to that, because I believe everything is energy, you know, and people are manifesting all the time, you know, through their words, through their thoughts, their beliefs and their values. And so not trying to be perfect, but just trying to be mindful and conscious of how I'm showing up, you know, from a spiritual perspective, in terms of what the Ramadan means from a spiritual perspective, you know, not eating and being able to identify with what it's like for people that don't have, you know, and then also from a more liberal perspective, it's also just about getting back to your sort of true north on the compass, I would call it, you know, and realizing that nobody's Teflon coated, you know, and that all we can do is ask ourselves, what do I want to do with the time that I have available, you know? Because I think I've realized probably a bit more than the average individual, because of my health issues that I've had in retrospect, of just how precious life is, you know, and how important it is to value the people around you, and how important it is to realize that every single experience that you go through ultimately serves a higher purpose.
Please visit and like the Living Ramadan Facebook page, where you can view various perspectives of Ramadan.
I find now that I'm living in the northern suburbs, I'm experiencing Ramadan in a completely different way, because I don't have Muslim neighbors. But I find this year the 2016 version of Ramadan seems to play itself out more on Facebook. So I'm seeing the most beautiful pictures of people when they break their fast, and people sitting together and eating, and and because of the interviews that I sometimes do with people who are doing charity work around this time and who are experiencing Ramadan to its fullest, I really get that feeling of the peacefulness that comes with it, that sense of family, that sense of being together. And so for me, that's a feeling that I get over this Ramadan time. As somebody, as a non-Muslim, somebody who's looking in from the outside, that it is a time of family, a time of people getting together, and a time of real awareness and reflection, which is something that I think everybody needs.
Akbar Khalfe tells us about the history of the hospital welfare and Muslim educational movement. His colleague Muhammad Umar focuses on the development of Madrasatul Khair.
Well, if you look at hospital welfare and Muslim education movement, it started off in 1942, so going way back. There were some concerned Muslims in hospital welfare at that time. In fact, it wasn't called hospital welfare, just some Muslims, local Muslims, saw some sailors and deemed to be, were Muslim during the Second World War. They were in Somerset Hospital, and no one saw to their dietary needs, especially halal food, and sort of were concerned about their well-being. And thereafter they sort of, okay, we'll do that for all the sailors that came to our shores. And that sort of blossomed into, let's look after Muslim patients in hospitals. And from Somerset Hospital, it evolved over time. So that was way back. So that's where the movement started in the sort of 1950s. They formalized it into Hospital Welfare Society. And over the sort of the ambit, and it's over the portfolios of the organization evolved. So from hospital welfare, looking after patients at hospitals, they're also looking sort of caring for the social and welfare needs of the community from the Muslim patients as well. And then as that evolved into sort of in the 60s, during the heart of apartheid and oppression, one of the founder members of, one of the members of the ANC, Yusuf Dadu, PAC, he came to the hospital welfare leadership at that time, and he said, why don't you organization start an educational arm? And the theme behind that was educate our youth so that they can play a meaningful role in the new South Africa. That was in the 60s, late 60s. In 1972, we gave out our first bursary check of 720 Rand, 1972. So as you can see, so now then when we renamed the organization Hospital Welfare and Muslim Educational Movement. It was called Muslim because of during the apartheid years we couldn't register under we had to register under some religious entity. That's why the name Muslim came. However, our bursaries that we do give is more than just Muslims, for non-Muslims as well. Although primarily our main donors and sponsors are Muslim. And so as we evolve over time, we also looked after the social welfare needs. We brought in the mortuary, which was also more or less at the same time as the hospitals. And that was started off sort of with Imam Abu Bakr Saban. Started off looking after the burial matters, where people needed sort of the bodies from the mortuaries and the system with burial matters. And that also grew. And Imam Saban's son, Imam Bayanuddin Saban took over when he passed on. And then Bayanuddin passed on, his son took over, also Abu Bakr Saban, he also passed on, etc. So primarily so we started with hospitals. We're doing 23 hospitals, mostly state hospitals, and some private hospitals as well, where you do the food inspections at these hospitals on a monthly basis. And then we also do sort of the social welfare activities, which is an ongoing thing. Education portfolio, where we assist people with needy students with loan bursaries, and we've got the school for the visually impaired, Madrasatul Khair, where we have school classes on every Saturday.
The students at Madrasatul Khair utilize a Quran written in Braille. Each Braille letter, or cell as it's termed, consists of 6 dots, arranged in a pattern of 3 dots down and 2 across. Different combinations of these dots make up the different letters of the alphabet, and each of these combinations can consist of up to 6 dots.
Way back in 1980, we were very closely associated with that organization at the time. At the time, the founder member was the late Yusuf Johnson, and here, of course, at the school was became a very vibrant school at the time. they were teaching fiqh, tajweed, all that thing. We're using the Braille alphabet, as it were, which consists basically, you won't believe it, it's only 6 dots, in fact, to be able to read the Arabic script, etc. And over time, as they progressed and so forth, the students graduating from that particular madrasa, on his passing way back in 2001, the madrasa started foundering because I think basically he was my main person, the driver behind that particular organization, as it were. And the support sometimes, being a Muslim organization is not easy. And it's a unique organization. They're a teaching institution which catered for those visually impaired people. Hardly any. In fact, it's a unique in the Western Cape, in fact. And he worked closely with a sister organization called Madrasa An-Noor, which is in Pietermaritzburg. Having said that, the teacher at the time, since his inception, the hospital was approached by the late Mr. Khalfi was approached by him to assist financially in the salaries of the teacher, which we did, in fact. And that teacher became so close to us in a way that he started respecting the organization for what it was doing, for its empathy and its interest in education, because that's our forte in the case. So when he passed on, the studio principal, the organization floundered, as it were, and there was no other support structure for him. The teacher, having had experience with what we're doing, how we conduct our activities, approached us to adopt the organization. Well, after much consideration, said deliberation really, he actually, we decided yes, the executive said yes, fine. And we then adopted and relaunched the organization as Madrasa al-Khair.
We teach them life skills, etc. We have quite a sort of a number of events with them, and they've certainly relished that sort of opportunity when we have a long cane rally with other schools for visually impaired. We go out to Atlantis, wherever the race takes place. And then where there's an elite walkathon, so we took them to the District 6 Museum, whatever outdoor activities we can, at least maybe once, 3 times, at least 3 times, 4 times a year, some activity we do it. Tough economic situation, we get hundreds of applications for bursaries, and our bursary is a loan bursary. We made it a loan bursary so that we can teach students responsibility. If you give everything free, then people don't value it. But it's not just it's an interest-free loan bursary, and we always say, when you buy the means, you start paying us back. And we don't ask for money up front, cash or anything like that. We're saying, at least on a monthly basis, you try to contribute back into your coffers so that we can use that same money for another deserving student. So it's quite a sort of, we go through a series of interviews. We just don't give bursaries. You have to motivate why you need a bursary. We look at the financial circumstances of the family. We look at what you're studying at, etc. And then we interview students, and then we have sort of, our pie is only so big. And sometimes we have to say no to students, which is sometimes hard sore, but we try our best. We don't give a full bursary, we give partial bursaries so that we can give more students can benefit from sort of the budget that we have for that. And on average, we do 70, 80 students, and we've also been fairly fortunate that a number of family trusts, other organizers come through hospital welfare to administer their bursaries. Even the Imam Abdullah Harun Trust, although they collect their own funds, but we administer the bursaries on their behalf. We help them with the interviews, etc. So we're forming a good partnership with other organizations, other family entities that got monies that they want to sort of trust money or sort of give a bursary trust fund on behalf of their late parents, and we administer that for them. So it's certainly a milestone for the organization, certainly a milestone for the community that we have existed for so long. So we say shukr to the Almighty Allah and for the community that's always been behind us. And we are planning a series of events. Our anniversary will commence in August 1942, and we're planning a series of events for each of the portfolios, and we're going to use the word commemorate, not celebrate. Celebrate means spending money. Commemorate means we have to remember the good things and try to see the way forward for the inshallah, maybe for the next 75 years. So each of the portfolios will have some activity, and we're still in the planning stage, and we will let the community know in due course what that's going to entail.
Please remember to visit and like the Living Ramadan Facebook page and view messages from South Africans living abroad comparing their Ramadan to Cape Town.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Saida and I am in Melbourne in Australia, and I've been living here for the last 6 years, alhamdulillah. There are many Muslims from various communities, from various nationalities, and that's probably the best thing that we like about the Muslim community in Melbourne. Aside from that, we are a big group of South Africans, and during Ramadan we have a lot of expat iftars where we get together and we have typical South African iftars, which is really wonderful because it does help us not to miss home too much. So we have all the typical South African meals and especially buka treats, iftar treats, very similar to back home. And we do get invited to lots of iftar functions, community iftars at the mosques. What we really like is that the mosques all cater for women and children, and most of the mosques do provide iftar for the communities. We have a lot of students living in Melbourne, and most of them not having any families would be very much alone if we didn't have these types of iftars at the different mosques and community centers. So this is something we really appreciate, and we do attend to meet different people and people who are not necessarily South African. So it does bring about that whole diversity and just a different flavor to Ramadan. But essentially, it is observed very much like in South Africa. The typical difference would be the foods that everyone has at iftar time. We are having a very typical South African Ramadan, which we all appreciate because we all miss home so much at this time of the year, especially. Oh, some of us say. Yeah. So we're very happy to be together and to spend this time together. Ramadan in Melbourne can be very different, but at the same time, depending on how we do it, it can be very much like a South African Ramadan, and this is what we're doing tonight. But at the same time, we often go to community iftars, and there are so many different associations who have iftar for everyone, for the community, and that helps some of us who don't have many family and friends in Melbourne not to feel left out or not to feel alone.
Tonight, inspirational and motivational speaker Abdul Ghani Babu Fablanka shares his insights on how one should live their life.
I find it very strange why some people devalue themselves all the time, or they think less of themselves. Just to give you a sort of an analogy, if you take a 100-cent note and you throw it on the ground, you fumble it up, throw it on the ground, you stomp on it, even throw some juice on it if you wish, but you pick it up, it's still a 100-cent note. So it doesn't matter when people stomp on you or belittle you or try to make you feel bad. You are still unique and of the greatest value.
And now, time for our spiritual melody.
हल्के मेरे सोनों के क्या चांद की तनवीर सितारों में चली है हल्के मेरे सोनों के क्या चांद की तनवीर सितारों में चुनी है। हल्के में रसूलों के मैं उनके गुलामों में हूँ जो सब कहरा का। मैं उनके गुलामों में हूँ जो सब कहरा का। सरदार रसूल सैयद मक्की मदनी है। हल्के में रसूलों के कह दो मेरे ईसा से मदीने में कोई कह दो मेरे ईसा से मदीने में कोई अब जान पे बीमार मोहब्बत के बनी है। हल्के में रसूलों के